Okay. So thank you. So we have taken from the experience the good things that worked out and the bad, and using both to improve on the next go. Plenty of knocks along the way, and it's how you grow and come back from any setback. The ability to recognize that sometimes things don't go your way, and the ability to reflect and learn from it. Excellent. Some great reflections on what resilience actually is. So like it said in the initial slide, tonight's best season yet seminar is on fostering resilience. We're going to have a little chat about what that looks like, ways in which we believe are a good way for building resilience, and then some reflections and takeaways at the end. Thank you for your interaction on the first question. There's quite a few interactions through the chat, and if you actually want to answer or put your hand up and speak, then please feel free. It doesn't need to be on the chat if you're quite happy sort of talking on the mic. So moving forward into the workshop. So what actually do we believe resilience to be? So resilience definition is the capacity to successfully adapt to difficult or challenging experiences. So it is not a fixed trait, which is sometimes, a common misconception around resilience. Individuals don't either have it or not have it. It is something that can be developed and trained over time. And a lot of you have sort of picked that up in your definitions in that sort of first slide chat. There's lots of different ways in which you can build resilience. I'm going to pass you over to Rich, who's going to give us a little bit more sort of scope around what resilience actually is in terms of sport and life.
Yeah, well, thanks for your responses there in the chat. It's useful for us to know to understand what you know already, because we don't want to we don't want to tell you what you already know. But some of those responses were great. So you've obviously got a really good idea of what we mean by resilience. As Nikki says, often it's thought of as this innate ability, this innate trait. You either have it or you don't, where in reality, it's a complex interaction of factors. Yeah, like everything, it's nature and nurture. So yes, it's something to do with the individual person's genetic makeup, but also it's around the environment as well. So if you just see on this diagram here, we're looking at that social support, which we bang on a lot about putting a really good team around you, and part of the reason is it is contributing to resilience. Confidence, is another factor here that we're looking at. Again, the people that we surround ourselves with contribute to confidence. That motivation piece as well, the coaches, parents, gym coaches, everyone around the athlete, how are they contributing to an environment that is helping the young person to tap into that motivation? So it's everywhere you look there, it really is about how these other people contribute to resilience, rather than it being you need to be more resilient. So that's from my point of view, that's the main takeaway. Like we are all part of resilience.
Thanks, Rich. And leading on from that, and leading on from the diagram, we're talking about sort of, life's ups and downs that are going to happen in sport, in education, and as they grow up. We talk quite a lot about the resilience muscle. It is something that can be trained. It requires reps. It can be better prepared going forward. The more skilled and the greater capacity that you have in terms of resilience can really help with preparing your child for sport, for life, training that sort of resilience muscle. And if it doesn't get trained, i.e., they're not using it, or there's points in their life where they haven't had to be resilient for a long period of time, that muscle can get weaker. So when they actually do need to use it, it can be more difficult. And it leads back into sort of what we were chatting about in the last seminar, when we were talking about difficult conversations and sort of prepping the ground and getting the foundations right. So this is something that you can work with them to help build, and it can be in maybe ways that you're not sort of used to either. It can be in ways which you're allowing them to make mistakes and allowing them to fail or forget things and stuff like that, and suffering the consequence of that sort of error. And that can help with sort of training your resilience muscle. Rich, have you got anything you want to add to that side?
Yeah, I think, resilience can be quite an abstract term. So actually to turn it into something that everyone can understand is, this concept of the resilience muscle. So, we all have a fairly good understanding of, we train a muscle and it gets stronger. Trevor will pick me up on this. But, we go to the gym, we lift weights and we get stronger. So just to try and create that analogy with resilience, I think is helpful. Just the more we can exercise this resilience muscle, the stronger it's going to be. And that actually reframes the conversation around actually deliberately looking for challenge then, rather than avoiding challenge. It's okay, this is going to be an opportunity. Maybe you're in a national championships for the first time. Rather than it be fear taking over, okay, well, this is an opportunity to work on my resilience muscle here. So it just totally reframes the conversation, and it's all about that growth then, because as that quote says, if we're just preparing the path, so clearing the way for our kids, and they don't have any opportunity to work out this resilience muscle, there's going to come a point where they're going to be met with a challenge that they just don't have the resources, the support team, the capability to be able to deal with it. So, part of this is preparing them from early days, these little bumps in the road, support them through those, and gradually, as they move through life and their sporting careers, those bumps in the road will get bigger and bigger, but their resilience muscle will have adapted alongside to be able to cope with those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's linking back into sort of difficult conversations. And, if they're going into a big competition and nerves really are taking over, if you've, prepared the ground, as in thinking about the processes around the event rather than the outcome, that is, a great way to sort of help, prep their foundations and grow their muscle. Paul, have you got something you'd like to add?
I'd like Trevor to add. I think I haven't got the other slides up, so I might be jumping ahead. But Rich was talking about what you need to do in order for the muscle to grow. But there's another element to that, Trev, that you talk to the young people out, don't you, in terms of load and the other aspect of it's not just training, but it's also other bits. Do you want to touch on that a little bit? And then I might share a personal story.
Yeah, you're leading to training too much and overwhelm.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, my cat keeps going on my keyboard. Is that what you were getting at, Paul?
Yeah, and the
overtraining
of rest and recovery, because that's where the growth actually happens, and
absolutely
not just overloading.
Yeah, you can't just throw, when you're training an athlete, you can't just throw more and more and more and more load all the time, at higher intensities and higher volumes. It's getting that rest and recovery and work just right. So trying to find that sort of Goldilocks spot. So yeah, like Rich said, when you got these smaller bumps on the road early on, they're great opportunities to develop that resilience muscle. But if we're trying to perhaps artificially throw too much chaos at our young people too soon, in too great an amount and too great a frequency, that might not be such a good thing either.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in my own life, if I share quite a personal story at the moment, Sarah and I, my wife, are aware of these things, and we don't look for additional challenges for our daughter, but we do put quite a lot of responsibility on her to do things by herself, and we're there to support. And I think what we've noticed at the age she's at now, which is 14, and other things are starting to happen in life, we've maybe taken away some support a little bit too early and too often for her. So she's starting to become a little bit overwhelmed at the moment. And those of you that know me and might know my daughter, please don't share this information with her. But we've noticed changes in her, which we think have come from the fact we've not scaffolded our support enough at the moment. And although we think we've been doing the right thing by allowing her to be really, really independent, actually at the minute we need to make life easier for her, and we need to do more and step up a little bit more. So because she needs that rest and recovery before she's ready then to go to her next kind of life challenge. So like, I'm not getting it right as a parent who thinks he knows quite a lot about this sort of stuff over the last 25 years. And it's super important to understand the capacity they've got, but also the toll it might be taking on them. And that might extend for days after that challenging experience. It's just not done and gone. So I think there's a nuance to it, isn't there? I think, and it's all grey, and we've got to be comfortable in the grey. But kind of linking back to the previous two presentations and thinking about the why and thinking about what they're doing and how you can help them build the independence is super, super important. But also there's a time and a place for it, and the better you know your kids and the better you pick up on the signals, then the better that journey will be for them. And I admit at the minute I'm not quite getting it right with my own daughter.
Thanks for that reflection, Paul. So I'm going to pass this reflection on to you guys now. So a couple of questions coming up on the next slide. So in the chat, please, or if you want to sort of verbalise or put your hand up and speak, what might you do to help your child build their resilience muscle? And do you believe there's anything you're doing at the moment which might be preventing your child from building their resilience muscle? So have a little think about self-reflection. What do you think you're doing which is helping, and what do you think you're doing which might be preventing as well? Give you a few minutes to put some of your answers in the chat. So thank you. Some answers coming into the chat now. So listen to them and watch their behaviour. Ask them, is there anything they need from you? Good one. Maybe it's time for a walk and a chat, or maybe even taking the leadership role to say, no, you're not training tonight. Yeah, that's good. I can see that you're wiped out. A lot of them are unable to see that or don't have that switch. Take the adult control over them so they don't feel it's them failing. Thanks, Charlotte. So we show the children that you keep going, it's okay to fail. Boxing has a lot of black and white, and there are lots of wins and losses. The losses are simply lessons, absolutely, and we dust ourselves off and we go again. We as parents are resilient, and we're showing them that this is a behaviour to take into adulthood. Great, thank you, Sharon. My son's coach is full of confidence and drives him to things that he hasn't been before, but I still have the parent fear of him getting hurt. I have to try and have a poker face so he doesn't pick up on my concern, but sometimes it fails. sometimes I'll do things for him rather than let him do them for himself. For example, watching kit, getting it ready rather than reminding him or leaving it so that he learns from it, which is what his dad says to do. Yeah, we've been there. We've been there as well. Many a day a hockey bag has been left in Douglas when it's needed in Peel, and so yeah, that is something that you can just let them suffer the consequence of not having their goggles or their kit or whatever it is can really help with that prepping the foundations, i.e. being organized, thinking outside of the sort of teenage bubble, which is within the next hour a lot of the time, never mind the next week or next day. So yeah, really good sort of ways to help build that muscle.
So if Charlie comes in with smelly kit next week, we'll know why then, Joanna.
Yeah,
Kind of just
absolutely.
to build on what I was saying, Nikki, I think it's the timing when that's done that's important. So as it doesn't overload them and doesn't make a situation worse. That's tricky. It's not doing it for doing its sake, but recognizing when they've got the capacity to cope with that significant challenge or setback, or or humiliation if they turn up to training and they haven't got stuff. Like if they're already full and we put that on them as well, that's not gonna be a good experience. So recognizing time, place, context in the wider scheme of things it's a planned activity rather than just otherwise you may not quite get the outcome that you think you're getting, which is where we're at in our house at the moment.
So just picking up on that point, because I think it's an interesting one. A sort of halfway house might be to sit down together and put together a kit checklist. So, you're giving sufficient support then to help the child put together a checklist for all that kit, but then you're handing the responsibility, right? You've got that list now. It's up to you to go through it line by line. And if something's missing, then you can come and speak to me or whatever, but you take ownership. So it's, all of these things, it's never going to be an all or nothing. There's going to be grades of how we can support, and that's the important bit, really. That's where we're probably going to try and fail at times, but it's just trying to strike that balance, as Paul was saying before.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things that can be helpful is that sort of normalizing struggle, like you've said in the chat. Sharon's mentioned, like, particularly in boxing, there's lots of wins and losses, and there's quite a lot in the media with boxing as a sport, like, always protect it, like you always have to win, like that's what a successful boxer is. But as an amateur, it's absolutely not the case, and it's the same in cycling, it's the same in swimming. It's there's quite a lot of what they see in the content that they might be exposed to, or being on the Isle of Man, like winning is sometimes quite prevalent for them. So it's normalizing that they should be feeling frustrated at times, and they will have plateaus in their training and their progression, and sometimes they'll feel great in training and other times they'll feel that it's really hard, or they're not progressing, and like actually all that's normal. And that is part of sort of, again, building that sort of muscle. And like Rich has just said as an example with the kit list, managing their responsibility at which is at the right time. So packing their own kit, giving them the sort of scaffolding to go and have a conversation with the coach if they're worried about something or just want to ask a question, or making sure they're thinking about the recovery. So asking for a snack after training, or coming home and doing sort of a 10-minute stretch, or being consistent with their bedtime routines, and reflecting after competitions with good narrative, i.e. like thinking about the process that's been involved rather than the outcome that they've seen. So that little that diagram that's on there, sort of gives you quite a good idea. So sort of high support and high challenge is a really good environment in which you can sort of facilitate sort of good progression and management within sport. Low support and low challenge is when things are just on autopilot and will start to plateau, or maybe go backwards slightly. But yeah, too much challenge and not enough support. So like Paul was saying, with like the sort of lack of scaffolding or whatever, can cause a problem, unrelenting environment, and therefore that can have sort of, its own difficulties. And then if you've got really high support and not enough challenge, it's very comfortable. But will you see much progression as a person in sport? Probably not. Do you have anything you want to add to that one, Rich?
Just thinking in general terms, we've seen a lot in the press recently about certain sort of investigations and reports, and a lot of these stories have come out of some of these kind of unrelenting environments. So I'm thinking there's been cycling, there's been gymnastics, there's been swimming, where perhaps the challenge has been high relentlessly, and the support hasn't equaled the level of challenge. So for me, it's just trying to. I know these are when our kids go into these sporting environments, we don't control them, but if we can get a feel for the amount of challenge that they're under, and the amount of support that they're getting from coaches and peers, we can then sort of fill in the blanks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, with the managing responsibility, that like there's grades, so talking to coaches themselves, so the first step might be that they accompany you while you talk to the coach. Then it might be, you both talk to the coach together. Then it might be preparing them to talk to the coach one-on-one. Reflecting after competitions. The ideal might be that they just go and do it themselves, but actually, in the early days, they might need more support to make that into a habit. It might be actually that it's better being done with somebody else, and you might be the appropriate person for that. So it sounds like the same thing, but like there's grades here, and we need to be careful that we're striking the right note as much as possible in terms of challenge and support.
Yeah, I think that the coach one is an interesting one, because we're seeing quite young athletes within, I don't want to use the word performance environments, but that essentially is what it is. And sometimes that interaction with parents becomes much less, and they really want to interact with the athlete only and not the parents. So if they're not prepared for that, if they've not had that sort of scaffold and prep in the lead up to going into an environment from that can be difficult for the parent and the child, and the coach might not be getting the best for the athlete because the comms, they're not used to communicating in that way with an adult. So it's a really, it's something to sort of bear in mind if you're thinking, you'll be the one sort of thinking into the future a bit more. Your teenagers and your athletes are thinking about the next minute. That's about as far into the future as a lot of them are programmed to think. So that's something to bear in mind. So if you see in the future that they're essentially going to be targeting like pathways and things like that, that is definitely something that you can do to help lay those foundations and groundwork.
And
Yes,
we were talking today, weren't we, about good coaches coach the person rather than the athlete.
Yeah.
So they've got a real good understanding of the person, and they've got a real good understanding then of how to support the person. A lot of the issues that we see are where the coach is coaching the athlete and they don't understand the person, so they don't get that support bit right. And I think that's where those unrelenting environments do kind of take over.
Yeah, absolutely. So shifting the sort of focus a little bit, how do you think, in the chat, how might sustained early success prevent your child from building that resilience muscle? Thanks, Sharon. So they always expect to win, always be the best, yet when they experience failure, it could have a detrimental effect on the child. Absolutely. Confidence drops dramatically if they set the bar too high because of too many wins, feeling destroyed if they don't get the result following a win. It reminds them that you have to keep, working. Absolutely. They expect success to continue, and when it doesn't, it really takes a hit. And, being on the Isle of Man and being in a small pool can happen quite often. I guess a big part of that is early local access. Yeah, like I've just said, yeah, before going away to compete, and then you become a little fish in a big pond, and sometimes that still means success, but maybe not in the way that they're used to, or at the level at which they're used to, and it can be really sort of difficult for them if their focus is solely on the outcome, which it is easy to be for teenagers, thinking I always win on the Isle of Man, or I always win sort of at regionals, or I'm always winning at this level, and then they take that step up, or they move up in age group, or something sort of changes, then yeah, it can be really difficult for them. And it's back to that sort of challenge support matrix, isn't it? So yeah, moving then to the higher challenge, the more relenting environments, if not got processes down and the support right, it can be really difficult.
I think it's reassuring them that, and supporting their desire to win, their striving to win. But equally, they can win and fail, or lose and succeed. It's that definition of success. If they can see that they're developing competence, they're moving forward, they're a better athlete for the experience. Yes, we're all trying to win. That's the goal of sport, isn't it? But if we can give them some markers in other areas that demonstrate that they're succeeding and developing and moving forward, then again, it gives them a different frame of reference then, and it's not all about the result.
Yeah, great.
And if we think back to that, sorry, Rich, if we think back to that first best season yet, where we're talking about early success doesn't predict future success as an open age, this is a large part of it. If your focus is on the outcome, you're less likely to develop the time to process or learning or growth or development, or reviewing your wins or your successes to identify how you're going to get better next time. All of those skills that are super important as you get older into more competitive environments aren't developed sufficiently, and that's where you tend to have people who haven't quite done so well at junior levels overtake people in the late teenage years and early 20s, and a lot of it is down to psychosocial skills, and not being able to deal with that transition fantastically well. There's no reason why that resilience muscle can't be built through early success, as long as Rich is saying, the framing of that is around development, growth, improvement, getting better, not necessarily the outcome and then resting on laurels expecting the same thing to happen next time.
And I think just picking up on some of the language there, the expectation, they'll expect to win, as Sharon says. Well, we want them to really want to win, feel they can win, feel they'd love to win. But and we want to keep that bar set really high. But what we don't want them to do is judge themselves negatively if they don't hit that high bar. So, the language we want to use, we want to keep that bar really high, so they are shooting for the stars, but recognize that just because they don't make that high bar, it doesn't mean it's a failure.
There's a really good video of I think she's an Australian race walker, and that's basically like she just won a medal. I think it was at the Olympics, and she really just talks about like, I wanted to win, I'd done the training to win, but you know what? This is the first time I didn't need to win. I just wanted to win, and it just like the actual win was like, the cherry on the cake, like everything else, like the whole making of the cake, the process of getting there, competing for a country, that was enough. The medal was just the the final piece of the puzzle, but she was like, I didn't need it, and it's a really good video. I'll put the link to the video and with the slides and stuff, because it's a really good example of that. Like, yeah, you can want to win, but you don't need it. It's not part
Yeah.
of you as a person.
And we have that conversation with quite a few young athletes of, this kind of age, late teens, that need, I must win, or I must do a PB, or I need to. It's that black and white language that sort of you get stuck in a corner there. Whereas just, it sounds, sounds like it's just semantics, but I'd love to win, or I can win, is so much different. There's concern then, not anxiety. And that is massive. A golfer, I need to hold this 10-foot putt versus I can hold this 10-foot putt. Straight away you're into a challenge state, you're more relaxed, you're loose, so you're more likely to achieve your goal. Whereas if you need to and you must, then you're getting tight, and then you're not going to perform at your best, and then it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, unfortunately. So a lot of the work I do one-to-one is around some of this language stuff.
Great. So just thinking about that, we should be dealing with sort of success and setbacks in a similar way. Both are inevitable parts of the journey. Helping them to manage the sort of hope and reality sort of concept, recognize and managing their own emotions, changing the narrative around failure. Like we were saying, it's not a failure, it's about learnings. Did you get your processes right? Did you get timings right? That sort of thing. Think about the process rather than trying to sort of give them an excuse as to why whatever happened. It just all comes down to everything we sort of said within workshop 1 and workshop 2, which is, if you're getting your plan do review right, all of this becomes more achievable, more manageable, and less of a massive thing for them. And those consistent narratives, so whether they've won, they've lost, they've failed, they've got PB or not, it can really just help with improving the sort of experience and yes, building that resilience, because it doesn't really matter what the outcome is, because something positive is going to come from it, because I've ticked this off, I've managed that, these sorts of things. And then just always sort of like what Trev was saying earlier on in the workshop, like prioritizing sort of good rest and recovery, like regardless of setbacks or success. There's quite a good saying, sit with whatever happens for 24 hours. If you win, be excited, be happy for 24 hours, and then move on. If you've lost and you're upset about it, sit with that disappointment, think of the learnings, think of the failure, but then move on. The world keeps turning, and it's getting that sort of consistent narrative around success and setback. Rich, do you want to add anything to that one?
Yeah, just in terms of, we obviously there's been a lot of talk about setbacks, but success can be equally as damaging. How are we responding to success? If we're, are we getting buoyed off success and then making poor decisions off the back of that, being reckless and rash? That's a danger. Are we learning from our successes? Are we spending enough time actually digging into those successful outcomes, successful performances, to understand like what we do really well? Because that's gonna feed into our confidence. And maybe if we've got a strength that is coming through time and again, would we be better spending a bit more time and effort developing that into a super strength? So again, if you're not dissecting the successes in the same way as the setbacks, then you're missing those opportunities for learning.
Yeah, absolutely. That's basically what we're chatting about in the next slide, like managing the ups and downs. Like, what does it require in both situations to proactively process what's happened and learn from what's happened and move on? And if there's not consistent narrative around it, that can make it difficult.
So this slide really is challenging you to think about the specifics of your situation. And I've thought about it from my position as well. How does my child respond to setbacks? and how do they respond to success, and what do I need to do in those situations to support my child in the best way? And again, we're all different. We all know how our kids respond to to different behaviors, different actions, and I think we need to be really clear on what they require from us in these specific situations.
Yeah. And it all sort of spins round back to that very first slide when we were talking about, social supports and the ups and downs, and what resilience actually is. Like, other people matter. And this is a really good quote: very little that is positive is solitary, and other people are the best remedy to the downs and of life, and the single most reliable up. It's very true. The support network is part of that fostering resilience, and success or setback, you want to be sharing it with them, and dealing with it as best as you can. Having the appropriate challenge at the right time. It's the whole support network. But you guys as a parent, like, you're sharing in this more than anybody else.
And even, tapping in there to the successes, what the dominant emotion with a success is going to be joy, isn't it? And you don't experience joy on your own, you experience it with other people. So, when things are going well, it's these other people that matter. And actually, when things are not going so well, the other people matter because they're the ones who are going to help you out of the hole. So yeah, we do bang on quite a lot about this support team, and there's a couple of athletes even over this last week who have really benefited from developing that support team, which in some cases has taken years. And they've had, challenges along the way. They've learned from those. But actually, I'm thinking of one person in particular who had a massive setback last week, who has responded to it really, really well, mainly through the amazing team that he's put together to support him.
Yeah, absolutely. So just some reflections and
Nikki, sorry.
On you go.
I was just gonna add the interesting challenge now, and sorry, my cat's going mad in the background as well. The interesting challenge at this time of most of your young people's lives, including my daughter, is teenage years, when they're actually trying to separate themselves a little bit from family and be more independent, and navigating that so as they still stay close, but they have trusted people away from family that you trust also, and making sure that dynamic works really, really well is tricky and super, super difficult. But knowing they'll come back to you when they learn those skills and they understand how important that social support network is. I'd just like to reassure all the parents that we are constantly trying to get the young people in our programs to talk more with their parents and to share more with their parents, so the parents can do an even better job of supporting their young people. So in this really challenging time of their life, that gap between you doesn't get too big, and it will get closer again as they move beyond this stage. But it's not an easy place, and we're always available to sit down and help parents support their young people through these adolescent years. But also, we're doing loads of work with those young people to make sure that they work with their parents appropriately to really reinforce your relationships with them, rather than drive a wedge between you even further.
Yeah.
And sorry, just one more. I know there's one person on the call that's experienced this, but a mentor as well, somebody from your child's sport who's maybe 3, 5, 8 years ahead of them, who can share their experiences. They've been through it, they've been there, they've done it, they've experienced what your kids are experiencing, so they can really help. That they've been at the coalface as well, so they can give a perspective that we can't. And again, it's about linking up with that right mentor.
Absolutely. So yeah, just some reflections, like you guys can, you know, help build that muscle, like having that narrative around processes, not outcomes, controlling the controllables. This has all been sort of, you know, we've looked at this across all the workshops, and hopefully they all tie together to, you know, make a sort of bigger picture. Match level of support to the level of challenge, so getting the timing right, making sure that you know, it is the right level of challenge, and you know, we're gonna make it, we're gonna make mistakes, but you know, that's part of the journey. Avoiding comparisons, getting their plan do review right. These are all things that, you know, they're working with us if they're in the Sport Aid Academy or some other parts of the program. And you know, ask them their why often, going back to that sort of management difficult, you know, conversations seminar, like what are they getting from it? Why are they doing it? What's the aim? And if they know that, and they know that well, you know, they will consistently have good times in sport and in life. Trev, Paul, Rich, anything further from you before I open up for any questions? No. Okay, thank you. So that is the end of our seminar. Hopefully you found that useful. Thank you very much for your attendance. We'll stay on the call if anybody wants to stay on and have a quick chat, or if you want to stick something in the chat just now, Rich, Trevor, I can answer sort of any questions. But otherwise, thank you very much for your time. Thanks, Charlotte. Thank you all. Thanks, Ron.
Hope Rom used voice activated messaging.
Ah, thank you, Andrew. He's a joy to have in the gym. Literally just parked up. Okay, well, if that's it from everybody, thank you very much, all, and we will see you all hopefully in the near future. Have a nice and safe TT when it comes. Take care.
See you, folks.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Bye. Ah, thanks, Sharon. It was good to see them both back today. Uh,
Oh.
I just stopped recording. There we go.